Hi there, this is Al24 News, live from Algiers. Coming up next in our news program. A large section of Hong Kong voters abstained from voting on Sunday to choose their representatives in the city's legislature, where a minority of them are elected by universal suffrage and the new rules implemented by Beijing, and only patriots can run for it. The death toll from Typhoon Rai has surpassed 200 in the Philippines, with humanitarian workers reporting complete carnage in the coastal areas, where they said the storm had left homes, hospitals and schools ripped to shreds. Also coming up, hundreds of thousands of Sudanese citizens took to the streets again on Sunday in rejection of October 25th coup. Protests continue against the coup even after the reinstatement of Abdullah Hamdouk as Prime Minister last month. And the left-winger Gabriel Boric has been elected Chile's next president with 55% of the vote. Boric defeated his far-right rival Antonio Cast to become the country's youngest president. Hello again and welcome. On the 19th of December 2019, Abdelmajid Tebboune was sworn in as the 8th president of the Algerian Republic. He took office in the midst of a turbulent political climate following the 2019 popular uprising known as the Hirak. With the confidence of the Algerian people, Tebboune established his popular legitimacy as the response of the Algerian political establishment to the country's political crisis. Ayadi Usama reports.
On December 19, 2019, Abdelmajid Tebboune was sworn in as the 8th president of the Algerian Republic. He took office in the midst of a turbulent political climate following the 2019 popular uprising known as the Hirak. With the confidence of the Algerian people, Tebboune established his popular legitimacy as the response of the Algerian political establishment to the country's political crisis. During his presidential campaign, Tebboune made several important pledges. He laid out key priorities and set major milestones, vowing to rebuild the country's ailing institutions, reviving its collapsing economy, increase the inclusion of its marginalized youth, restore its place in the international scene. Therefore, Tebboun's current term should be seen as a period of stabilization. In his inauguration speech, Tebboune vowed to engage with the Hirak in a spirit of trust. The 2019 uprising set a high bar for future officials and their stance on individual and collective liberties. By contrast, President Tebboune believed that Algeria's political issues could and should be addressed through elections. Consequently, his political roadmap was focused on the renewal of legal frameworks and public institutions. Constitutional reform was the current administration's first step to address domestic concerns. On November 1, 2020, a new constitution that represented Tebboun's vision of administrative, political, economic and foreign policy reforms was approved in a popular referendum. The new constitution put in place the legal framework for significant shifts. It introduced the possibility of deploying troops abroad for national security reasons, and it led to important new legislation such as the Electoral Code. Thereafter, a new Algerian parliament was elected on June 12, 2021, with the votes of 30% of electorates. Snap local elections followed on November 27, 2021, which saw a slightly higher participation rate of 36%. The renewal of political institutions was essentially perceived as a strategy to change the autocratic practices. President Tebboune assured Algerians that he would respect and safeguard political and civil rights, and he released several non-partisan political detainees through presidential pardons.
The explosion of Algerian society in 2019 protests was an expression of political distrust and socio-economic grievances as Algeria's large young population struggled to deal with worsening living conditions. To address this, the new head of the Algerian state promised to revive the economy and improve the condition of remote and marginalized regions. Zahra Ferjani reports.
Tebboun's approach focused on changing the country's economic model and addressing inequality and economic disparities. The current administration has primarily targeted the gradually growing dissatisfaction of the silent majority and is trying to address the underlying causes of the economic crisis. Since independence, Algeria's economic model has been heavily dependent on the oil and gas industry, and this makes it highly vulnerable to fluctuations in energy prices. However, Algeria's economy witnessed some stability during his 2 years in office, backed by an increase in oil prices. President Tebboun's plans envisioned facilitating investments while prioritizing local initiatives. And for the first time in Algeria's history, exports away from hydrocarbon reached over $4 billion, while Algeria also recorded a trade surplus of over $1 billion. The resistance of outdated bureaucratic structures that continue to block development projects has also constituted a serious barrier to realizing the president's agenda. Still, the presidency is to impose its authority on other state institutions, even when it comes to implementing presidential decrees and orders, so as to carry out its economic plans. The current limitations on economic development have prompted the government to take measures designed to directly benefit average citizens. The president introduced changes to the taxation system and financial incentives for those impacted by the global pandemic. Nevertheless, this approach was also challenged by endemic corruption and rising prices, which the government is still fighting. So as to manage the pandemic situation, Algeria made various partnerships with China and Russia to locally produce anti-COVID vaccine, and the National People's Army was fully mobilized to meet the demands of the citizens. More importantly, the Finance Bill of 2022 included the lifting of state subsidies on some products with the intention of rationalizing Algeria's social welfare policy. However, the current informal nature of the market and the lack of advanced preparation is another challenge the president is to take up to avoid the marginalization of society's poorer segments. In this context, Algeria's political and socio-economic realities and the challenges Tebboune faces on both fronts have made foreign policy an obligation to boost the government's plan through fair economic partnerships. For instance, he opted for the opening of workshops to review EU partnership agreements and refused to put economic sovereignty at stake by resorting to external debt.
Still with the same story, President Tebboune has emphasized his plans for a return to the international scene, and foreign policy is seen as a vital asset for the new commander of the armed forces. Hassan Berkani reports.
Tebboune repeatedly expressed his commitment to defend Algeria's historical causes, including the Western Sahara and Palestine. This has led to the emergence of an assertive foreign policy approach that capitalized on Algeria's military and diplomatic corps. This new strategy aims to reclaim the country's previous regional role and expand its international influence. For decades, Algeria has been absent from the regional diplomatic scene. Although conflicts in neighboring countries posed a serious security threat, Algiers lacked modern and proactive policies to address them. As President Tebboune took office, he reasserted Algeria's role in addressing regional crises. The president's first step at the international scene was in the Berlin Conference, his first visit abroad, where he pushed for peaceful and democratic resolution in Libya. The authorities are now looking at the next Arab League summit, set to be held in Algeria in March 2022, as an opportunity to showcase their diplomatic return. Tebboune wanted to solidify Algeria's principal foreign policy to expand its international presence by adopting a sovereigntist narrative. The political leadership is looking for a bigger role on different levels, especially that the region is changing and new geopolitical realities have emerged. Thus, this will require concession and more pragmatic approach, yet the president vowed that no concession to be made over the country's history, which created tensions between France and Algeria. The diplomatic relations between France and Algeria witnessed some tensions due to Algeria's sovereign stance against French president provocations, which led President Tebboune to close Algeria's airspace for French military aviation. Previously, Tebboune had officially asked for restitution of the skulls of resistant martyrs, as well as requesting the handover of colonial archives. President Abdelmajid Tebboune, who took part in the burial ceremony alongside military and civilian figures, called on France to apologize for its colonial past. In the Sahel and Africa region, Algeria's interest in its continental and regional surroundings is a priority for the president. with Algeria's refusal of the Zionist entity joining the African Union as an observer member. Morocco's provocations also urged Algeria to sever diplomatic ties. The president made sure of taking the bilateral relations with Tunisia to the ranks of strategic alliance level. Algeria renewed its position in supporting the Palestinian cause during the visit of President Mahmoud Abbas, which was an occasion to announce the initiative to bring together the Palestinian factions and to end the division. Algeria also recorded diplomatic presence in various forums and witnessed a historic visit by the Italian President Sergio Mattarella, in addition to adopting a policy of equality in bilateral relations with a number of European countries.
And in a piece of information, the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, has honored today, Monday, at the People's Palace, the players of the national football team and the technical staff after their coronation in the 2021 FIFA Arab Cup in Qatar.
Monsieur le Président, voilà. Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président, Monsieur le Président.
And now, U.S. health officials urged Americans on Sunday to get booster shots, wear masks, and be careful if they travel over the winter holidays as the Omicron variant raged across the world and was set to take over as the dominant strain in the United States.
The government is gearing up for the next phase of battle. In a 2-year fight against a virus that has killed 100,000 people in the United States and disrupt every aspect of daily life. The President Joe Biden said for the unvaccinated, we are looking at the winter of severe illness and death for unvaccinated, for themselves, their families, and the hospitals. They will soon overwhelm. But there is good news. If you are vaccinated and you have your booster shot, you are protected from severe illness and death. 2 U.S. Senators, Democrats Elizabeth Warren and Cory Booker, said on Sunday they tested positive for coronavirus disease 2019, but were experiencing only mild symptoms.
Elizabeth Warren said on Twitter she was grateful for the protection provided against serious illness that comes from being vaccinated and boosted, and urged other Americans to do the same.
Are those million cases going to be sick enough to need health care and especially hospitalization? This is a big remaining question, Margaret. Is this virus actually not quite as capable of causing severe disease?
A big message for today is, if you've had vaccines and a booster, you are very well protected against Omicron causing yourself disease. So anybody listening to this, who's in that 60% of Americans who are eligible for a booster but haven't yet gotten one, this is the week to do it. Do not wait.
Despite the threat from the more transmissible Omicron variant, life returned to near normal in Sydney last week with almost all tough curbs lifted ahead of Christmas, as vaccination rates rank among the world's highest, explaining that new variants of the virus will not come to an end. Therefore, Australian authorities urged the population to move away from fear in the midst of a highly transmissible of the Omicron variant. New Zealand authorities said today, Monday, they had linked a 26-year-old man's death to Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine after the person suffered myocarditis, a rare inflammation of the heart muscle, after taking his first dose. The death is in New Zealand's second linked to a known but rare side effect from the vaccine, after health authorities in August reported a woman had died after taking her doses. COVID cases are still moving forward in Europe, and most countries are taking serious procedures to overcome this new outbreak.
The UK was put to the high-risk countries list by the German health authority after more than 65,000 new cases were confirmed this week, the largest number since the pandemic began. As Europe seeks to contain the rising number of infections due to the highly mutated Omicron virus, this will require tougher travel restrictions. The Netherlands will go into lockdown over the Christmas holiday, according to the Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte, in order to combat an outbreak of the Omicron coronavirus strain.
Dat is onvermijdelijk vanwege de...
Schools, universities and all non-essential shops must shutter from Sunday until January 14th, with schools closing until at least January the 9th, and residents are now only allowed 2 guests at home, except on Christmas Eve and over the New Year period, when 4 guests are allowed.
Denmark will close theaters, cinemas, concert halls, museums, and many other entertainment sites in the wake of a record-breaking COVID-19 outbreak caused by the highly transmissible Omicron strain. The authorities advised individuals to work from home, prohibited performances with more than 50 people, and required people to wear face masks in restaurants. The French government has recommended people to be tested and keep Christmas celebrations small. According to French Prime Minister Jean Castex, the health pass would change to a vaccination pass in the new year, with tougher restrictions on unvaccinated people. The mayor's office in Paris confirmed that the fireworks and performances scheduled for New Year's Eve on the iconic Avenue des Champs-Élysées have been cancelled. Italy will require unvaccinated European Union visitors to quarantine for 5 days, and those who have been vaccinated must have a negative test within 24 hours of arriving in Italy in order to be able to freely circulate. Indoor restaurants, cinemas, and sporting events are only open to persons who have been vaccinated or recovered from COVID-19. The vaccine obligation has now been expanded to school personnel, law enforcement, the military, and anybody working in the healthcare field. In Spain, several regions have introduced stricter measures for the unvaccinated ahead of the Christmas season, extending use of the COVID-19 certificate to enter public places such as bars and restaurants. More than 80% of the Spanish population is already immunized, and Spain has given the go-ahead for children aged under 12 to be vaccinated.
Senator Joe Manchin announced his rejection of the current legislation, Build Back Better bill, on Fox News Sunday. Manchin expressed his concerns about inflation and the cost of the program, effectively ending the Democrats' hopes to pass Biden's $1.75 trillion social spending plan.
To the people of West Virginia, I can't vote for it. And I cannot vote to continue with this piece of legislation. I just can't. I've tried everything humanly possible. I can't get there.
The Chinese government's top diplomat said on Monday that Taiwan is a wanderer that will eventually come home and not a chess piece to be played with, reaffirming Beijing's determination to bring the island under its control. China claims democratically governed Taiwan as its own territory and has in the past 2 years stepped up military and diplomatic pressure to assert its sovereignty claims, to anger in Taipei and deep concern in Washington. Debts that have fueled China's economy over the past years are now biting back. This comes after most of Chinese property giants are facing debts that may affect the country and the whole continent. Usama Ayadi reports.
Asia is expected to face tense issues in terms of economy. According to banking experts, China's debt distress will affect the economy of the whole continent. Property developers, including the biggest groups in China, have lots of opaque liabilities that may or may not be reflected on their balance sheets, making it hard to assess the company's true credit risks. Volume of such issues has been badly dented by concerns over the financial health of Chinese developers, with issuance of high-yield corporate bonds in the Asia-Pacific region falling in 2021 to its lowest in 3 years. Across the Asia-Pacific region, there was $50.4 billion worth of high-yield corporate bonds issued this year, the lowest since 2018 compared to $63.9 billion in 2020, according to Refinitiv figures. In higher grades of credit across the region, a strong start to the year means volumes will be higher for 2020 compared to the last year. Privately placed bonds often issued by special-purpose companies with obscure names. One tactic to keep the debt off balance sheet and off the radar regulators is to provide guarantees for the bonds that apply on all days except June 30 and December 31st, when the developers compile their financial statements.
A large section of Hong Kong voters abstained from voting Sunday to choose their representatives in the city's legislature, where a minority of them are elected by universal suffrage under new rules implemented by Beijing, and only patriots can run for it, while other seats are appointed by committees and interest groups. The participation rate did not exceed 29.3%. The death toll from Typhoon Rai has surpassed 200 in the Philippines, with humanitarian workers reporting complete carnage in coastal areas where they said the storm had left homes, hospitals and schools ripped to shreds. A spokesman for the police told reporters on Monday that at least 208 people were killed and 52 were still missing after the storm carved a trail of destruction in central and southern provinces last late week. Authorities in Vietnam prepared to move 1 million people from low-lying areas along the south coast on Monday as a typhoon approached after it battered the Philippines with floods and landslides that killed more than 230 people. Typhoon Tam Binh is expected to slam into Vietnam late on Monday after bringing misery to the predominantly Christian Philippines just before Christmas. Over 22,000 people were evacuated throughout Malaysia Sunday as the country faces some of its worst flooding in years. The tropical Southeast Asian nation often sees stormy monsoon seasons at the end of the year, with seasonal flooding regularly causing mass evacuations. Islam Sidi reports.
In one of the most intense rainfalls in the country, homes full of water, turtles, snakes roaming in the area, this is what Malaysia has witnessed. Heavy floods where thousands of people driven out of their home. Dozens of bus routes in and around the Malaysian capital Kuala Lumpur have cancelled, and train services leading to the port city of Klang were postponed. According to the Malaysian Prime Minister, rainfall on Friday and Saturday was an equivalent to total monthly amount in normal conditions. Meanwhile, he promised instant aid to flood victims as well as an initial allocation of $23.7 million to repair damaged houses and infrastructure. Sunday marked the latest hit by floods to be in Perak City at a time where other 6 states were suffering from the disaster, an ultimate figure of 21,000 people who were evacuated to relief centers. Rescue efforts were underway for those who stuck in their vehicles and outside of their homes. More than 66,000 personnel from the police, army and fire department have been mobilized. The floods also disrupted operations at 3 water treatment plants in Selangor, with taps expected to run dry for tens of thousands in parts of the state and the capital. Malaysia's worst flooding in decades took place in 2014, forcing some 118 people to flee.
The left-winger Gabriel Boric has been elected Chile's next president with 55% of the vote. Boric defeated his far-right rival Antonio Cast to become the country's youngest president. More details with Nabil Khazini.
Gabriel Boric, 35 years old, becomes the youngest president in the Chilean history. A student leader who came to fame after leading protests and asking for social reforms in Chile in 2011, took advantage of the Chilean revolution in 2019 against social inequality to offer a progressive program where he promised social reforms, free education, and universal health care. Gabriel Boric addressed an impressive crowd of several hundreds of people who gathered to celebrate with him his victory.
The coming years will shape the future of our country. That's why I guarantee you that I'll be the president who takes care of democracy, who listens more than talks, who firmly combat for the privileges of those in need and who works every day for a better life of the Chilean family.
Boric won with 55% of the vote, securing victory over his right-wing opponent, José Antonio Cast, who trailed with 44%. Cast congratulated his left-wing opponent, saying that Boric deserves respect. The outgoing Chilean president, Sebastián Piñera, held a video conference with Boric to offer his government's full support during the 3-month transition.
I want to congratulate you and wish you the best of success in your government. More than 8 million people voted. It is one of the elections with the highest citizen participation in a long time. Democracy compliant, and Chileans have given an example of democracy. You were part of that. I congratulate you.
Lo felicito.
Gabriel Boric will become Chile's president when he is sworn in on March next year. His term lasts until 2026 and will encompass a period of social and political transformation for the country.
Hundreds of thousands of Sudanese citizens took the streets again on Sunday in rejection of October 25th coup again. Protests continue against the coup even after the reinstatement of Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdouk last month. Ayad Osama reports.
Hundreds of thousands of Sudanese citizens took the streets again on Sunday in rejection of October 25th coup. Protests continue against the coup even after the reinstatement of the Prime Minister last month. The revolting population demands no military involvement in the political scene of the country. Demonstrations marched towards the presidential palace, marking the 3rd anniversary of protests which touched off the population and led to overthrow the long-lasting autocrat Omar al-Bashir. Protesters crossed a bridge linking Omdurman with Al-Khartoum city, despite the heavy deployment of security forces in the region, as they blocked all bridges leading to the capital. Clashes erupted between demonstrators and security forces less than a kilometer away from the presidential palace. Security forces fired tear gas and grenades to try to break up demonstrations and disperse the crowds. Demonstrations were also planned in different cities of the country, as the shared images of the beginning of the marches, which chanted, "People are strong and retreat is impossible." Security forces sealed off major roads leading to the airport and army headquarters, including Joint Army and Parliamentary Rapid Support Forces, which were heavily deployed around the presidential palace.
And finally, we wrap up our news edition with some sports news. As warm welcoming for our Algerian national team last night in the international airport, the Green Caps received an official welcome by government officials led by Prime Minister Ayman bin Abdurrahman. Abdurrahim Kashur was there and has more to tell.
Waiting and waiting the coming of the champions, whom they reached the Algiers International Airport at 8 p.m. Despite the cold weather, the whole Algerians were outside last night. Men and women, girls, mothers, fathers, all families chanting, dancing and screaming out loud in an unspeakable happiness that no one can express what was happening or what he was doing.
So here from the Algerian Center here in Algeria, as you can see, people are still waiting the coming of the Algerian national team to celebrate with him the Arab Cup nation. It didn't happen before because this is the second time our national team is working after the African Cup for the first time, and now they are taking the lead in the Arab Cup champions.
So we are so happy for this win and proud of our Algerian team, the Sahara Warriors.
Can you say something about that?
We're here celebrating and waiting them, and the adrenaline is getting high each minute we are here. So we're waiting for inshallah the better to come in the coming World Cup Qatar 2022.
The win was very great for us. It was the first time for us this cup, and we are very happy. We have to thank all the team, the staff, the medical staff, the coach, of course. We are very proud of this team, and we wish more success to us.
Finally, after dropping out from the airport, the golden bus reached the center of Algiers precisely at the midnight, in a scene that pushes you only to stop talking and only keep watching or shouting out loud, calling the players with their names. Can someone hear you? Well, it means that you are still alive. At the end, One can say this celebration used to be done only with the first team in all the Algerian football history. But now with Jamal Belmadi and Majid Bouguera, it makes no difference. Either we play with the first team or the second or even the third. We are deadly certain that we're gonna make it through and everyone can be a champion.
That's all for me, Nadia Kasmi, and the rest of the team. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.